Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. So given that you've already clicked on this clickbaity video with a clickbaity title, we can actually get into the focus of this video. So my objective for this video is to actually take you through the process of setting up your terminal to be as efficient as possible. Now, of course, there's multiple ways of doing this, and at the end of the day, it's going to be entirely up to you on what tools you want to use and what extensions, so on and so forth. Now, in my case, the terminal emulator of choice is going to be Terminator, and you can install it on Kali or any other Linux distribution by simply typing in the package name Terminator. That's the package, the actual name it's known as in quite a few repositories, as far as I'm aware of. So by default, doesn't come prepackaged with Kali or any other pen testing distributions. Now, you might be asking the question, why on earth would I use Terminator as opposed to the standard terminal emulator that comes prepackaged with my distribution? And that's a valid question. Well, number one, the first reason why I actually use it is the amount of preferences or the various configurations that I can make to my profile, but one of the most important ones is the ability to actually split up your terminal window and create multiple terminal windows or tiles within the same terminal window. So for example, I can create a vertical split, and I now have a second terminal window, or a terminal tab, if you will. It's not really a tab, more like a tile. If you've used i3, this should be fairly simple for you. So for example, if I'm running htop here on my first tile, and in my second one, I want to run a simple, let's run an Nmap scan here. So we'll run it on 10.10.10.5, right? That's the Kali IP. So I can hit enter, just type in my password there. And then I can also split this particular terminal into a horizontal tile. So I can hit, Control Shift E, and I now have my third tile, and I can sort of multitask. And as you can see, one of the configurations that I made is to actually dim out or to reduce the brightness in the terminal sessions that are not active. And this is a great way to actually know what window you're currently working in. So that's great. Again, you can also do this using your mouse if you actually decide on doing that. So I can split it horizontally or vertically. So again, I can do it like so, and there we are. All right, so that is these are my preferences for my terminal. And of course, the next element that I'm going to hit on is your shell. Now, by default, if you're a beginner to Linux or you don't have much experience, you're pretty much going to be using bash, right? And you might have heard of some other shells out there. So for example, if I list out my shells on the system, you can see we have the actual Born shell there. We have a Born Again shell. You then have rbash, a dash. You also have ZShell, which we'll talk about in a second. We also have tmux. So tmux is my terminal multiplex of choice, which again is fairly simple to use. I've actually made videos covering tmux before. So tmux essentially allows me to create multiple tabs within one terminal window. Now I might be saying, why can't I just create another tab with Terminator like so, using Control Shift T and use it the same way? Well, the answer to that is ease of use. So for example, if I wanted to create another tab, I can just hit Control B and C, and that'll create me a new tab. And each of the tabs is numbered, so I can actually, switch back and forth, through or cycle through any of these tabs as I wish, and I can create as many as I want. But the great thing I like about this is I can actually rename the tab. So for example, I'm currently on the ZShell tab. I can rename this, and I can type, for example, we can keep this reserved to Nmap. I can then switch into my into tab 1, and of course they're ordered from 0 to however many tabs you want to have. So I can then rename this to something like, let's see, we can just say, we can call this Go Buster, right? If I'm sort of splitting up my workspaces, and that's how I like to view it, that these are actually workspaces for various tasks, or you want to keep yourself organized, this is actually a great way of doing that. So again, I can then cycle back and forth. So, move on to to tab 0, which is Nmap, perform my Nmap scans there. When I want to move on to Go Buster, I can do that as well. If I want to, create a tab or rename this to Metasploit, I can do that as well. And there we go. So again, that keeps me organized. And of course, I can just exit out of each of them like so, and I'm out of tmux. So again, if you're new to Tmux and you want to learn how to use it, you can check out our Tmux video. Now let's move on to shells, which is where I actually started off. I really don't like, petering off into other topics, but right. So ZShell by default really isn't that usable. So, if I say, ZShell here, you can see it automatically takes me into ZSH, which is a framework for ZShell. But if we open up my browser here, you can see that ZShell is, just another Unix shell, and very similar to Bash. But one of the things that I like is ZSH, which again I've also covered before. ZSH is, as it says right over here, it's an open source community-driven framework for managing your ZSH configuration. Now, many people like using ZSH to customize their themes, so on and so forth. But in this very video, we're going to be taking a look at how to automate most of your pen testing commands, and how to improve your efficiency in the terminal, because typing in commands, the same commands every time, that can be quite cumbersome, and learning how to automate your workflow is vital to your success, your long-term success, right? So that's why I wanted to make this video. Now, by default, again, if we take a look at my configuration, my ZSH or my ZShell configuration file here, you can see that my theme, you can actually copy that if you want, and I've listed out a few other great themes that you can use here that I personally like. But if we scroll down to the bottom, right over here where it says plugins, these are the plugins that I use. So I use the Git plugin, ZShell syntax highlighting, ZShell pentest, Nmap, Quiver, and web search. So I'm going to be taking you through ZShell pentest, Nmap, Quiver, and web search really quickly, or quite extensively really, because they are quite extensive in terms of the functionality that they offer. But you also should be familiar with the functionality of aliases. So you can see at the bottom here, it gives you examples of aliases that you can actually use to automate or to shorten the commands for particular utilities or particular tools. I'll give you an example of this. If I wanted to, if I was tired of typing in MSF console every time I wanted to, launch the Metasploit console, I could create an alias here, and I'll just call it MS, or we'll just call it MS, and then the command, of course, is going to be MSF console. So the alias MS will actually launch Metasploit console for me, right? And I can then quit and exit, restart ZShell, and if I type in MS now, you can see it's going to start up the Metasploit framework for me. And of course, the speed of the Metasploit framework is really not the focus here, but that should start it up for me. There we are. So it starts up the Metasploit framework for me. So I'm just going to terminate that, and let's actually go into the configuration file once more. So I can actually disable that particular alias. I just wanted to prove a point, but you can see some of the other aliases that I set up. One of them is called my IP, and what that does is essentially prints out my Kali Linux IP address, which is again, it limits the results to the interface Ethernet 0. And then when I'm working on labs like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, I then limit it to the interface tunnel 0, and the alias for that is VPN IP. So again, if I just reload ZShell there and I say my IP, like so, you can see it actually displays my Ethernet 0 interface details. So my INET address or my IPv4 address, and my, it should actually display, well, it actually doesn't display my IPv6 address, but there you go. And then if I type in VPN IP, because I'm not currently connected to any of the, I'm not actually connected to any of the labs through OpenVPN, it's not, it's not actually going to display anything. So those are simple examples of how you can automate your workflow. And of course, there's multiple ways you can do that. And you can also do this with Bash if you want to do that. Now, I'm not going to touch upon environment variables, primarily because environment variables are limited in terms of the functionality that they can offer. But for example, I can use it to configure paths to word lists. So for example, if I list out my environment variables for my ZShell configuration here, I can create new ones, to specify particular paths. So if I wanted to, set up an environment variable for my word lists, I can actually do that. But we'll get to that in a second. So you can actually see I specified my pass list environment variable, and that again can be used to again, really easily specify the ROQ word list right over here. So again, you can do that if you want. Now let's take a look at the ZShell pen test plugin, or it's actually a plugin. Now the ZShell pen test plugin is used to help you automate, it actually sets up really useful aliases and functions for the lazy pen tester. Now, of course, that's, I'm guessing that's some sort of sarcasm, but in any case, it's pretty useful. So installing it is fairly simple. You simply need to clone the repository, and of course it requires the OMyZSH framework. So you just need to clone the repository and add it into your ZShell configuration file. And once it's added, you just need to restart your ZShell session. And these are the aliases that it adds. Not too many, but really helpful ones. And it automates quite a few things. So you can actually view the configurations. If I just go into my home directory, OMyZSH, custom, and we take a look at plugins, and we then say ZShell pentest, right? And within here we have the actual ZShell, the plugin here. So these are the aliases here, which I've actually configured to meet my requirements. In terms of, for example, the ifconfig command, I've limited it to the interface Ethernet 0. In your case, you might be on a wireless device, or you might be using Wi-Fi. So you want to change the actual interface to your interface name. Let's see, there are a few other aliases here. So for example, for the functions, let's take a look at some of the functions. So this is where the plugins really come into play. So we can create a scan directory for all our Nmap scans, and we can actually use it then. And there are a few others, but I just wanted to take you through this process, right? So let me take you through some of the commands. So for example, if I type in me, that prints out my IP address. It's nice and cleaned, so I can easily access my IP address whenever I want to do that. Let's take a look at some of the other ones that are interesting. So enum for Linux is shortened to E for L, so E for L. And of course, you can do this, through your standard aliases, as I just showed you, but the functions are where things really get interesting. So this will create a scan directory, will create a directory for saving your results. And as I said, you can use it for other scans. So, I can say create scan directory, and it's going to create, the scan directory here. And it's going to sort it out into the date, when I actually created this. So if I run any scan now on this particular day, it's going to save it in here. And that is actually really fantastic, because the reason that's fantastic is because you can then sort out your scans. If you're, if you're running regular scans, if you're performing bug bounty hunting, or you're actually going through quite a few labs on Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, this can actually help you, save your scans so that you can always return to them at a later date. You can then also have a great system of organization that's handled, automatically for you each day, and you can then limit and sort out what you want and what you don't want. So for example, if we take a look at some of the other functions here, for example here, enum web, we can actually start, performing some web-based enumeration with whatweb and nicto, and we can then provide a word list here. So I can just show you that right now. So enum web, HackerSploit.org, right? Fairly simple. We'll give that a few seconds to start up. So there we are. It tells us that, it's going through Cloudflare, which we get, and then there's a redirect, and then it gives us the uncommon headers there. So, immediately we get a redirect, and that's because it's going through Cloudflare. So now it's going to perform a series of scans with various tools. One of them is going to be with whatweb, and let's take a look at some of the other ones here, just so that I make sure I'm getting it right. So we have nicto, so on and so forth. So again, that'll do it for you. Now the interesting thing here is you can see it automatically, navigates me or changes my directory into the scans directory. And if we take a step back, you can see it actually created a directory for the domain hackersploit.org. So that's great if you're working on bug bounties. It'll actually create, directories for the domains that you're working on and the subdomains that you're working on. So, if I go into hackersploit.org, you can now see we have the nicto results and the GoBuster results, so on and so forth. And again, you can view them. In my case, it's not going to, display anything much here. So results, nicto, and yeah, that's pretty much empty. And of course, I can get rid of it once I'm done. But in my case, I'll just let it persist there because we're going to, test out a few additional things. Right. Another interesting function that I really like is the ability to, set up a or to host a web server on your Kali VM in the event you're trying to transfer files from your Kali VM to the target virtual machine. Traditionally, you'd use Python. So you say Python m, and then you'd use something like simple HTTP server, and then say hosted on port 80. And then if we navigate to that address, so 10.10.10.5, that's my local address there. You can see it actually lists out. There's actually a web server here that I can use to host data. And of course, you should never set up a web server or host any files within your current home directory or your user's home directory. That's really not a smart thing to do. But I think I've made my point. So instead of typing in that long command, I can simply type in serve, and it does the exact same thing. And I can do it within any directory. So, if I was on my desktop here and, let's say I wanted to share some Linux, or I wanted to download some Linux enumeration tools, I can just say serve, and it does that for me. And I can then, again, just refresh this, and I have linenum, linps, and the Linux exploit suggester script for me there that I can easily use to transfer over to my target. And I'll be using this in future videos. I just wanted to make this video to clarify all of this so that when we move on in the future, you guys know what I'm doing when I type in serve. Right. All right. So I've terminated the web server there. And let me just go back into my home directory. So we've spent quite a bit of time on the ZShell pentest plugin. But let's try and move on to a few others here that are interesting, right? That I really liked. Right, so you can also, scan TCP with mass scan if you want, and there are a few others. But I also wanted to cover the Nmap plugin for ZShell or OhmyZSH, which is great. This is something that I really, really like. So, for example, and of course, this link will be added in the description section. The Nmap plugin, sets up some useful aliases, that you can actually use to make yourself more efficient. So again, you can just clone the repository, or you can simply download the Nmap plugin.zshell into your OhmyZSH directory in your home directory and add it to your ZSH configuration file. But for example, these are the aliases listed here, and I really like it because I'll show you this right now. If I wanted to list out the open ports on a particular target, well, if I was to do that manually, that would be quite cumbersome. But now all I need to do is type in nmap open ports, and then type in an IP address here. So for example, let's see, 192.168.2.2. Hit enter. It's going to start the scan immediately, and I don't need to do anything else. Now, of course, if you're a beginner to pen testing or using Nmap, then I recommend you learn what each of these aliases are doing, or you learn how to use Nmap first before you try automating it. But in this case, you can see I just scanned my Windows host here, and it tells me exactly the ports that are currently open. Now, there are a few other aliases. Let me just open that up. I can also list my interfaces, which is also great. So Nmap list interfaces. There we go. Lists out my interfaces on my actual Kali VM. So we have the local host here. We also have my Ethernet interface, and it gives me both IPv4, IPv6, and the actual gateway. Does it give me the gateway? Yeah, there we are. The mask address there, the gateway provided for me. So really great. And let's take a look at some of the other ones. I can also perform a slow scan, which is used to avoid, it actually prevents the logging of scans by the target if they are quite aggressive or quite heavy. You can then run an aggressive scan on the target, and this is similar to your aggressive scan that includes OS detection, service version detection, and the caveat here is it runs it on all ports. So it's actually running it on the entire gamut of TCP ports, also UDP as well. There are a few UDP aliases here. So for example, Nmap full UDP, which is great. The traceroute functionality, And let's look at a few others. Now, of course, for enumeration with Nmap scripts, you're going to have to do that yourself, but you can also create your own aliases. You can customize this particular plugin by going into Oh My ZSH plugins, and we're looking for custom. Actually, that's before that, so that's under custom plugins and Nmap plugin, and yeah, we'll just edit this particular file here. There we are. So you can start creating your own aliases here for yourself. And there's actually a script scan for the Nmap full with scripts alias here, which is actually great. I didn't actually see that before. But you can create your own aliases that utilize scripts or certain scripts, and that way you can really automate your workflow. Right, so that is the Nmap or MyZSH plugin, which is great, and definitely check it out. It really is very simple to get it installed. Now, one of my favorites that I actually really like and just discovered it recently is the web search plugin. Now, the web search plugin is fantastic if you work in the terminal, especially as a pen tester, and you're trying to search for something, and you don't want to go through the process of opening a browser window and a new tab. This particular plugin is for you. So again, you can just clone the repository, or you can just download the actual plugin file and put it within your Oh My ZSH directory in your home directory, and add it to your ZSH configuration file. The plugin name is Web Search, and the way you use it is fairly simple. I'll actually show you. I'll show this to you. So, for example, if I am, if I just, discovered a vulnerability, or I wanted to perform some research on a particular service and I wanted to learn more about it, what would I do? So in this particular case, I can say web search, right? And then I specify the search engine that I want to use, or the source rather. So, well, that's not the correct spelling. Well, I can say Google. And then if I'm looking for a particular, if I'm trying to research something, I can search for, let's see, VS FTPD 2.3.4. That's a well-known vulnerability, but just see what happens here. So it automatically opens that for me, and it displays the results for me. So, it automatically does that for me through my terminal. So I can run this again, but this time I can search YouTube, for example. So I can say YouTube, and we can search for let's see, Rick Atsley. Whoa, that's not supported. I actually saw that supported. Let's go back in here, because I think it did support it when I did use it before this. Let's see, Yahoo, YouTube. I don't think they actually have it in this particular version, but heyo, you can actually do it in some of the older versions that I've used before. That being said, we can actually try this with another search engine. So for example, DuckDuckGo or Yahoo. So we can say DuckDuckGo. That's not gonna give us anything much now, but we can search for Eternal Blue, and that'll run the search for us with DuckDuckGo. So that's great if you're, if you're working in the terminal and you want to, search for something really quickly, search for a vulnerability or a version. And of course, I believe it does work with regex or regular expressions, and you can actually use some search engine docs if you want. The great thing, as I said, is you can search multiple. You can actually search from multiple search engines. And you can also search GitHub. So for example, if I'm looking for, let's see, web search, I can then say, GitHub, and I'm looking for Bloodhound. A lot of you guys have been making recommendations, for me to actually cover this tool. I now get the Bloodhound tool really easily. I can also do this again. So let me just close up these particular tabs there. So, if I want to search for the bug bounty toolkit, right? And I just hit enter, and that'll bring it up for me right over here. And there we go. So you can already see how much quicker this is, because you can search, you can actually bring up results from sites, as I said, like GitHub, DuckDuckGo, Stack Overflow as well. That's if you're really interested in searching for particular issues with your code. The other one that's great is archive.org. So for example, you can search for files or any any information that, would be on archive.org. I haven't tried that out with subdomains because that could actually be quite useful. That being said, you can, so there we are. There are also aliases for bank searching with DuckDuckGo, which you can actually do that, using, for example, if you wanted news, YouTube, the wiki, map, image, ducky, etc. So you can limit results on DuckDuckGo to either YouTube videos, the map, image, etc. So that's also great. If you want to add a search engine, add other search context to the plugin, you can use the ZSH web search engines variable, set it before my ZSH is sourced with the following format. So you can actually add that, you can add your own search engines, and I think I added it for YouTube a while ago, but you can also add Reddit if you want as well. But YouTube also works similar to this, where you provide the video ID. Well, you actually get rid of the video ID after running a search, and you get the actual URL. Right. Okay. So that is the web search plugin. Now, the last one that I wanted to take you through is quite an advanced one that I've been using quite a bit recently, and that is Quiver. Now, Quiver is a meta tool for Kali Linux. So you might be asking yourself, well, what exactly is this meta tool? Well, Quiver, as it says over here, is an organized namespace of shell functions that pre-fill commands in your terminal so that you can ditch your reliance on notes, copying, pasting, editing, copying and pasting again, so on and so forth. Quiver helps you remember how to use every tool in your arsenal and doesn't hide them behind scripting that can be cumbersome to maintain or update. All right, so let me just make something clear here. Quiver doesn't work like a typical automation script. So, for example, you'll see multiple scripts out there or on GitHub that automate, web recon, for example, right? So what it's going to do, it's going to automate Nikto scan, so on and so forth. All you need to do is just execute the script and provide an argument, either the domain or another set of arguments, and it'll automate that for you. The great thing with Quiver, as it says over here, is it actually pre-fills the commands in your terminal, so that firstly you can actually customize them to your liking, and secondly you get an understanding of what's happening, and thirdly you can actually learn through Quiver how to perform certain scans. So I'll just go through this a little bit more, right? Instead, you can use Quiver to build a composable on-the-fly workflow for every situation. So that's the second most important caveat here. And the way I've been using Quiver is, to customize my own workflow. So Quiver doesn't cover all tools. It's the creator's own curated collection that they're still adding and updating. There are many tools for many different types of engagements and targets, etc., right? So you can see the features here. It pre-fills the commands within a terminal. I'll actually show this to you in a few seconds. It provides well-organized commands with tab auto-completion. That's great. Installs as ZShell or ZSH shell plugin, which is great as well. Customizable settings and global variables. Recon phase commands for OSINT, enumeration of common services. Web enumeration, brute forcing and hacking. Exploit compilation, that's been really helpful for me when I've been trying to compile various payloads. Reverse shell handlers, which is also fantastic. I'll show you this in a second. Built-in logbook for on-the-fly notes, saving and saving commands. So I'll probably make another video covering Quiver in depth because it really is amazing. And there's tons of things that you can actually do. So installing it is fairly simple. Just clone the repository and you can add it to your ZShell configuration file, right? All right, cool. So as it says here, Quiver organizes commands into namespaces starting with QQ. So that's the actual prefix, right? And then you can then sort through the various categories in terms of the functionality based on things like enum or recon. And I'll show you how this works in a second. To see an overview of all namespaces, simply type QQ help, and each namespace also has its own help command, such as QQ enum web help, and that'll provide you a listing of all available commands. All right. Before you get started, you need to install all the dependencies if you want every tool to work, because there's some namespaces or some commands that actually require certain tools that you may not have installed on Kali by default. All right, that being said, to prep your environment, this is an example workflow for bug bounty hunting. You can it says right over here, if you have markdown notes, configure the path. So QQ global set notes. So you can set your default directory for notes. So it's going to set a global variable so that every time you then use any enum or any recon namespaces, it'll actually save the notes there for you. You can also set up session variables. These are session variables, remember, for the bounty target. So you can set QQ set project or the domain, but in my case, we're not going to go through this. All right, so let's actually go through this together. All right, so using Quiver is again, getting to understand how it works will be entirely up to you, because if you want to, speed up or improve your efficiency, you need to actually go through the various commands that they provide you with. To get started with Quiver, we'll say QQ hyphen, just to list out all the available commands. And you can see there's actually a ton of commands here that automate various things. So for example, let's look at something interesting here. And of course, it's very important that you install all the tools so that you can actually leverage all of this. Let's see. Let's actually take a look at some of the, let's say we wanted to automate some recon. So we're going to say recon. Well, let's try enum first, right? So let's list that out. So QQ enum, and let's look at some of the web enum commands that we can actually use to automate. Now, of course, it's not going to take this long once you know how to use this tool. But let's say we wanted to detect the web application firewall, or try and detect to see whether there is a web application firewall protecting a web application. So to do that, we can say web and then WAF, right? And then we hit enter. It's going to ask us for a URL. Now, because I've been using this before, it's going to autofill the domain that I actually used there. But I can just type in, you can type it in again, hit enter. Now, the great thing, as you can see over here, is it actually pastes in the command for you. So you actually know what's happening here. And you can actually customize the command to your liking. This is the great thing. It's not just automating everything without you knowing what's going on. So you can actually customize it before you run it. And the great thing is it automatically saves it for you. Let me just go back here. It automatically saves the command for you, or the output of this, into a directory that you'll actually specify when you first use Quiver. So in this case, it's stored under hosts, HackerSploit.org, WAF. And this organization is great, because if I change the domain, or, if I'm performing a bug bounty, if I'm, doing bug bounty hunting, and I'm moving, to different subdomains, the results are saved differently. And you can always go back and analyze them that way. So everything's being logged for you. So if I hit enter, it's then, of course, going to use WAF for us. And it's going to tell me that, it's running, or it's behind Cloudflare. And of course, if we now head over into, we can actually just cat the content here. So desktop, Quiver, hosts, and hackersploit.org, and waf.txt, you can see it gives us the useful information there. It's behind Cloudflare. Let's take a look at some of the other useful ones. So enum, and of course, I'm taking you through this manually, so you can actually see what this looks like. Let's take a look at some other enum commands that it can actually automate. So it automates a variety of Nmap scans, similar to the Nmap plugin. So, discovery scan, ping sweep, sin sweep, so that's half open, UDP, TCP dump, so it does that for you, and then also does mass scans for the for web, obviously, as it says over here. And let's look at some other ones. Also automates a variety of typical MySQL commands. So for example, brute forcing MySQL can easily be done with Hydra, and you can automate it like so. So for example, if I paste that in here, type it in, enter, I hit my rhost information, in this case 10.10.10.5, and the user that I want to use, or the user list, but in this case, let's try the user root. The database is MySQL, and it gives you the Hydra command right over there. And of course, you can see that I specified rhosts incorrectly because I don't have a MySQL target here, so there's really nothing there. But it also sets up the default word list for you, so on and so forth. So you can see how it can really automate lots of stuff. I wanted to check out a few other ones that I wanted to demonstrate, and of course that is going to be, let's see if we can find it here. Let's see, for bug bounty, there we are. So, you know, directories, you can enumerate directories, the robots.txt file, GoBuster, also with wfuzz. You can also enumerate the listing of S3 buckets. So, you know, similar to what we did in the dumping S3 buckets video. You can also enumerate basic things like the host IP address, so on and so forth. So that's enum, right? Now, if I list out the entire list of workspaces, like so, you can see it sorts them out into various namespaces based on their functionality. And the shell ones have been very, very helpful. So, for example, QQ shell handlers NC, that's netcat. You can also set it up with UDP as well. But for example, let's take a look at SMB. So if you wanted to enumerate, or you know, to perform some enumeration regarding SMB. So for example, you have enum for Linux, SMB client connect. These of course are null. This is going to use the null specification there. Let's see if we can find some other interesting ones that I wanted to actually share here. Let's see. It also has some native Kali commands here. So, you know, netwatch, your packages, you can query and upgrade your packages. But I was looking for some other interesting ones. There we are. So the exploit compilation instructions. So if I wanted to compile a Windows exploit, I can simply use this particular Quiver command here, and I'll actually show that to you right now. So if I paste that in here, I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask you for the source, so the source file, where the actual code is being stored. In my case, I don't have any. And then the output file, right? And then I hit enter, and then it's going to automatically give me the compilation instructions. Now, you probably can tell already, because I have ZSH syntax highlighting enabled, that I don't have the required compiler to actually compile an exploit. So it's not going to do that for me, because I, you know, firstly don't have that particular package installed. So, you know, that's a bust there. But my point here was to actually demonstrate that to you. So I'm just going to take you through a few other ones. And of course, you can go through this yourself. Some of the ones that I use, I can actually show you right now that are actually helpful. I actually have found myself using the Nmap ones quite a bit. Once they're within my memory, I know them, you know, quite well, and really don't forget them. And they automate quite a few things. So there we are. Let's see a few others that I wanted to take a look at. So DNS recon, that's a great one as well. So, you know, for example, we can try and you know, perform some DNS enumeration here with DNS recon. I hit enter, domain, our hosts. Yeah, we can actually just set that as, that's probably going to be the name server. If I hit enter, there we are. It should actually give us information regarding the domain. There we are. Yeah, so it actually does it for us, and I don't need to go through that entire process. My point is, again, you can also see we have another interesting one here for Nikto. If I paste that in here, and of course, it's very easy to find these. So for example, you know, I can say web, and then I can list them out, and then I can say, you know, Nikto, and it automatically switches to Nikto for me. And I just hit enter, HackerSploit.org. It gives you the command and the user agent that it's actually using. And it shows me where the information will be output, in my case, under the correct directory for the domain, HackerSploit.org. I hit enter, it runs the Nikto scan for me and automates it for me there. But again, the great thing about Quiver, just before we end this video, is the fact that you can actually see what's going on. And again, it really speeds up your process or your methodology when going through bug bounties, pen testing as well. And I'll probably be using it in future videos. I just wanted to make sure that you guys are comfortable with the system that I'm going to be employing, so that you don't, you know, post or write comments, you know, asking me what you know, why they tried typing in commands and it wasn't working for them. So I'll probably be referring you to this video many times. That being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you have any other helpful ZSH plugins that you use, I would love to know about them, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. A huge thank you to all of our Patreons. Your support is greatly appreciated, and this is a formal thank you. So thank you Shamir Douglas, Ryan Carr, Sandor, Michael Busby, Sid Saab, Doozy, Tafim Bari, Dustin Umpress, and Michael Hubbard. Your support is greatly appreciated, and you keep us making even more high quality content for you guys. So thank you.